Hi, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Funky Rainbow. This, I don't know what to say, Saturday morning. We just heard last evening that the lockdown in Bangalore has been extended by another 10 days, and it always weighs heavily on us, when we're locked down and we can't send our books here, there, everywhere. I can see so many of our friends joining us, right away on Facebook and on Instagram. So again, a very, very, warm welcome to everybody who's joining us at this bazaar at a time that has been rather difficult for everybody, right? I mean, there's so much of tension, there's so much of fear, there's so much of conflict in all our minds that we just felt that it might be lovely to pick books, that I believe are just the best peacemakers in the world, books that we can dip into, books that we can read, books that show us every single time why we should give peace a chance. I can see familiar friends there, and I'm saying hello to all of you very quickly. Joanne, Kripa, Book Pickle, lovely to see all of you here this morning. I know many of our friends have joined us on Instagram as well. I want to say that, please do watch us, on the show where we have a guest speaker who comes in. And today, our guest speaker is joining us, a writer, a children's writer, who's joining us all the way from London, and she's going to be in only at 12:30 in the afternoon because of the 5-hour difference between London time and India time. So with a cup of coffee, and I think that's really brave to wake up in the morning and to be bright and to talk about books. I mean, well, I think Nenika Mehtani, our guest who's going to join us at 12:30 today and not at 12 o'clock when our guests usually do. I want to tell our friends on Instagram that at that time we can't stream the broadcast on Instagram. So please do join us on Funky Rainbow's Facebook page or on our YouTube channel if you can. Archana Atri, I can see you here. Good morning, and lovely to see you at the Book Bazaar, back again. I know you were there, 2 weeks ago. We're so glad that you're joining us now when you find the time and the opportunity. So, of course, like I said, the times have been, with happy things happening, not so happy things happening. And I'm going to, start off by paying, our respects and, to a person who was so, so dear to us and whom we lost to COVID 10 days ago. Dr. Padma Baliga, a wonderful academic and library educator, and a huge reader of books, and even more than that, a big, big supporter of the Book Bazaar. I can see, yes, of course, that's a picture of Dr. Padma Baliga up on our screens. That we lost her to COVID, and for us at Funky Rainbow, that was such a huge loss. I mean, somebody who supports us, but somebody who loves and understands books and champions free libraries. I mean, somebody who has unflinching faith in the power of books and libraries. I know our world is poorer for Dr. Padma Baliga not being with us. But I know many of you who are watching us this morning do know of the work that that she has done. And we know, I can see Joanne Saldana saying Padma has just joined the stars and she will be a reading star. Indeed, she worked with an organization called the Reading Stars. And I want to say that now that she's up there with the stars, that starlight will definitely continue to shine upon us. That was, I mean, it's every time we lose somebody, it takes, and I can see Joanne saying that, I mean, these conversations that we have with each other, they prevent us from going down into the dumps. We all need that right now. Our children need that right now. And like life is always bittersweet, I know that, while we lose someone, we celebrate the birthday of someone who's been such a beloved writer in the Indian, kidlit scene, Ruskin Bond, who celebrated his 87th birthday just recently. And a big, big shout out going out to Mr. Bond. And I've always dreamt that, if there was a time that we could interview him or we would get a chance to talk to him, I would always introduce him saying, "My name is Bond. Ruskin Bond." This Bond, playing such a deep role in our lives, whose books we have enjoyed, growing up, and, that children continue to enjoy even today. I was delighted to sort of sneak my way into the office despite the lockdown and find this wonderful book from Penguin waiting on my desk just this morning. All time favorites for children. That is Ruskin Bond's 25 of his favorite stories, beautifully illustrated. I'm afraid we don't have all the copies. We don't have copies of the book yet. This is just a copy that the kind folk at Penguin Random House have sent to us to read and enjoy. So a big, big, shout out going to Ruskin Bond, who celebrates his 87th birthday. While he is at 87, just yesterday when I was talking to Muttama and Sham, over the phone, we realized that our bazaar has just turned one. We started our first bazaar on the 23rd of May 2020, when we had been locked down. And between all of us at Funky Rainbow, we can't believe that the bazaar is celebrating its first birthday. It seems like a lifetime of meeting people, introducing children's books, promoting the discoverability of Indian children's books. But we have to say that this first birthday has been made possible primarily because of the support of so many of you: writers, illustrators, parents, teachers, librarians, publishers, who have kept us going through this very, very challenging year, and who, all of you who have made it possible for us to get to this first birthday. So, okay, so Sham says, well, he couldn't find festoons to, on the graphics, and so there's snowfall instead. But we're all always happy for snow, and somehow I think that those snowflakes falling just makes it seem like we must give peace a chance. I know that this is true for all of us at Team Funky Rainbow, and that's Muttama and Sham and Bharti and Sujita and me, that these books, the books that we've been recommending across the year, and these bazaars and these conversations with all of you, have kept us locked down but not out, definitely. So thank you once again to all our supporters, all our fans, all our champions who are rooting and cheering for us from the sidelines. We love you a great, great deal. And you have, as much as you say we have, you have kept us going. So the birthday greetings well and truly to all of you. Of course, we felt that we must do something to celebrate this one, and post the bazaar, we're going to, I can see so many happy birthday messages coming up. Thank you, Kripa. Thank you, Joanne Saldana. Thank you to, all of you who are sending us our birthday wishes. I know that we are here because you are there with us. We're going to put out our books on a 15% discount to celebrate this, birthday, this special birthday for a year later. Somehow, of course, it feels like we have been running and arrived at the same place 1 year later, but we are richer for friends and we're richer for books, and that's what counts most of all, really. So the thing is, we're going to put out a discount voucher once the bazaar is done. None of us could make it to the office to design that and put it up, but we will design it once the bazaar is done and put it up on our website, and you can use that across the next 2 days. I mean, it'll be valid till noon on Monday. a 15% discount for all our fans and all our supporters, and all you champions of Indian children's books. I can see Archana is wishing us a happy birthday, and Joanne Saldana saying a year of wonderful Saturday mornings from all of you. Invaluable. Thank you to each one of you. We really do love you deeply, deeply, from the bottom of our hearts. So, of course, today we decided to pick the theme of peace because, like I said, with so much conflict all around, I just felt it might be lovely to, explore conversations around books that promote peace, that say that peace should be given a chance every single time. Of course, it was also, prompted by the fact that the 16th of May, which was the Sunday that went past, was the International Day of Living Together in Peace. And the UN General Assembly declared 16th May as the International Day of Living Together in Peace as a means of regularly mobilizing the efforts of the international community to promote peace, tolerance, inclusion, understanding, and solidarity. The day aims to uphold the desire to live and act together, united in differences and diversities, in order to build a sustainable world of peace, solidarity, and harmony. One line of declaration, one line from the UN declaration that really resonated with me when I was reading it yesterday was this one, which is contained within the constitution of the UNESCO, which says, since wars begin in the minds of people, it is in the minds of people that the defenses of peace must be constructed. So here it is, here we are promoting a whole host of books that help us build these defenses of peace, and in our minds first, helping our children understand. In fact, even more than us helping our children understand, what is lovely about almost all the books that we have in our collection is that the children, give us hope. They hold the hope of a brighter, beautiful, more peaceful future than we've seen this far. I can see Tamanna saying, happy birthday, Tamanna here. How delightful to see you, my dear. Lovely to see a child, a reading child at that, watching us at the bazaar that promotes books of peace. I'm going to start off with my first recommendation this morning. And, it is a book whose title is just the word that is the solution to everything in the world. And we just have a single copy. In fact, this is probably the first time that we're bringing, beginning of the bazaar with a book by a Western writer, because our, mission is all about promoting Indian writers. But this one was too beautiful to let pass. This one, which is Robert Sabodas' Love. It's just that word that changes everything in the world, that gives everyone, everything, every kind of diversity a chance. And I just felt that, we should set the tone for this bazaar with this beautiful pop up book that celebrates love that's all around us. And Robert Sabuda, that master of pop ups, really. The book begins saying, I love you. And the next page, which we open up, and you see this beautiful, gorgeous pop up, which says, and will always cherish you. And I hope you can see this mama bird saying that to the little birds in her nest. What a fabulous book it is. The science, the art, and craft of these pop ups. I'm just tempted to show you one more page, which again says, I love you. And this time you can see the rains. Gauri Shekhar saying, can I book this book, please? Please, log into our website. All our friends, watching us, all the books are up in the website. Sorry? Okay, and my colleague Sham saying that the link to the book that's right there in the chat. We urge you to go to our website, click the link that says Book Bazaar, the drop down menu. The first of the drop down menu lists will be War and Peace, and one of the books in that list is definitely Robert Sabodas' Love. Gauri, we ask you to wait till noon if you want to, because we're going to put out the 15% discount voucher, and you can get this beautiful book at that discounted price. The second spread that says I love you through the rains, and there is this beautiful pop up of the an elephant saying I love you and will keep you safe. My gosh, I mean, just the things that we want to hear, just the things that our children want to hear. And this one, published by Penguin Random House, it's just an exquisite piece of art and craft, by Robert Sabuda, priced at 1399 rupees. Well worth every paisa that you pay, simply because you can pick it up any morning that you want to, and read it with your child, to know that that the child, she or he, is loved, cared for, and that's just what matters eventually. I can see Muttama saying there was a sad news this morning of Sundarlal Bahuguna's passing. Yes, this world, really, where there's happy things and sad things that sort of juxtapose themselves so closely to each other, that we really need books to give us the strength to get past this time. I can see Tamana saying, that's so pretty. It is indeed such a pretty book. Our next recommendation this morning is a beautiful book for young readers. I mean, Robert Sabuda's book is for readers of all ages, absolutely. But the next one that we're going to recommend is this lovely book from Tulika called The Cloud Eater, written and illustrated by Chuang Dorji Bhutia. And these books, they may not literally talk about war or conflict, but they surely send the message of peace and harmony in so beautifully. And this is a big book, which means the size is really large, and you can see these gorgeous illustrations with very, very little text inside, telling us the story of a giant girl called Phum Top Chen, and a playful, strong giant girl who was really, the children in the village where she lived, which is the Tibetan village that she lived, loved to play with her. The thing is, what did Phum Top Chen like to do? Well, she liked to blow clouds here, there, and everywhere. She liked to eat them up too. And how we know that there is some conflict in the book? Because just some pages down the line, I mean, when the people in the village get mad with her at one point and send her away, and she goes away sadly, looking to see where she can make a home. There are these lines that say, till many hundred miles away, she met a large and troubled crowd who had fled their homes in fear and not of their own accord. We know what that means. At least us adults, we know what that means. And what does the wonderful giant girl from Top Chen do to help those people who have been sent away from their lands, who've had to flee their lands, not out of their own accord? Irrespective of whether the child gets that message or not, it's a beautiful, charming old world story about a big little special girl, who breaks different gender stereotypes and tells us a story of why peace always gets a chance. This one, like I said, published by Tulika, we would recommend it for 3+ year olds, priced at 245 rupees. Book Pickle wishing us a very happy birthday. Thank you. And we wish for a million more to Arundhati Nath. What a pleasure to see you at the bazaar. So glad you've joined us. And you say it's so good to listen to us once again. And yeah, I mean, Muttama making a comment saying you do not get brownie points. for a comment, which Tamanna put up earlier, saying, I was talking about you with your auntie, but that works well. Of course, fangirls. We have mutual fangirls, aren't we, Tamanna? Our next recommendation this morning is again a beautiful book, that comes to us, and surprisingly from the Northeast. How is it that they have these stories, these wonderful stories of peace, or at least stories and folk tales in which you can read the meaning of conflict and resolution of conflict into them? It's perhaps, it's perhaps their history, the strife and the conflict that the region itself has seen. This one by Mariam Karim Helawat and illustrated by Shalini Biswajit. A beautiful story set in Sikkim, from the valley of Yumthang in Sikkim, about a young girl called Kunzang. And who is Kunzang? And look at these glorious illustrations, lyrical, both the writing and these vibrant illustrations, adding so much lyricism to this story about this young girl called Kunzang. I can see Joanne Saldana saying, I love this book. I agree that stories from the Northeast are beautiful and deep. Yes, indeed. So many layers of meaning tucked into them. And when we do these bazaars, when we chat with all of you, discovering so many of these things ourselves with newer eyes each time that we look at these books. Preeti Ramchandran saying, cheers to the birthday team FR. Thank you so much, Preeti, for joining us. तुम जियो हजारों साल, at least हमारे books जिएंगे हजारों साल. Definitely. Thank you for joining us. Rupa Baliga, what a pleasure to have you at the bazaar. You too say that this book is beautiful and we loved it. Kunzang, the wild child, is such a hit at home. Indeed, Kunzang. So Kunzang is on a kiang. And what is the kiang? The kiang is her horse. And she rides around everywhere, she grew up on, the description begins with her, growing up in the midst of this, huge growth of rhododendron flowers. And, she grew up on their nectar, and her hair was wild and red like their petals, her eyes a deep pink. When she stood among the flowers, it was as if she was one of them. Look at these beautiful illustrations. So what happens? Kunzang is like riding around. Nobody stops her. Nobody, is able to see her close. Nobody looks her into the eye. And she just rides swiftly on the kiang, on her kiang, across the valley, riding with the wind. But of course, a couple of, many years after this beautiful, idyllic life, there comes a king called Bhupen, who's known to love horses. And Bhupen, comes to this valley, over here in Sikkim, and rests with his soldiers. And one day happens to spot Kunzang riding on her kiang, and he wants the kiang come hell or high water. So, of course, he sends out his soldiers, as, kings and men are warned to do, just believing that any power can be possessed or any power can be seized. He sends his soldiers to capture Kunzang. And what happens? It's a beautiful story. Like I said, it's a wonderful folk story that you can simply just read at one level. But for us, we saw the message of peace just shining through these lovely rhododendrons and Kunzang with her glowing red hair. So this one, published by Tulika, we'd recommend for 5+ year olds, priced at 135 rupees. Vijay Lakshmi Nagaraj, thank you so much for joining us at the bazaar. You're saying happy birthday to FR's Bazaar. Wishing you many years of books and bazaars and your company, definitely, Vijay. Annapurna Das saying happy birthday to our bazaar and wishing for many, many more. When the times are right, I hope we will finally meet one day and be doing something at your school, Annapurna Das. But thank you so much for joining us. We are celebrating, Muttama clarifying that we're celebrating the first anniversary or the first birthday of our bazaar. But Funky Rainbow's own birthday is in July, and we really hope the world will become bright and colorful by the time we get to our birthday in July. Our next book, again from Tulika, Who Will Rule, written by Meena Raghunathan and illustrated by Harsha Nagaraju, is again a story of so many animals who are living together quite happily. But when those numbers become so large, the creatures, all the creatures in the universe, and this is at a time when human beings didn't exist in the universe, the creatures come together to decide who will rule the world. Does anyone ever need to rule the world? Well, it's $1 million question, but this book answers it so beautifully, because different groups of creatures, there are each group of creatures comes forward to stake a claim to say that they must rule the universe. And you can see the first group of creatures that come in are the mammals, and Meena Raghunathan quickly putting in some information about animals, I mean, about mammals like the aardvark, the antelope, the armadillo, the anteater, and, talking about some traits that mammals have. From there, we get on to the birds, and you can see the birds swooping down and saying that we have to rule the world. Of course, the story is loosely based on an Aboriginal tale from Australia. And what happens, which set of creatures rule the world, and what ultimately shines through in this book is one simple truth: we are all in this world together, and it's only together that we can live happily and peacefully. But of course, you have to read this lovely, charming book to find out. Joanne saying, another favorite and much needed book. I love discussions, books like this one, Kindle. Indeed, so well said. Recommended again for 5+ year olds and priced at 150 rupees. Like I said, all these books up at our book bazaar. Please do go to our website, www.funkyrainbow.com. Click on the tab that says Book Bazaar. The drop down menus, first item will be War and Peace, and all these books in there. And post the bazaar, we are going to put out a happy birthday bazaar discount voucher, which would be valid for 2 days from today to 12 noon on Monday. Please make use of those discounts and pick up the books that you enjoy, the books that we're talking about and that you think you enjoy or your children will enjoy. I'm going to move to another favorite, and I can see a really favorite friend of FR here. Just now, Sunila Kulkarni Gupte saying, "Hello, Funky Rainbow team. Many, many joyous returns for the Bazaar anniversary. Wishing you everything wonderful with many fantastic books around, and we benefit, and us too. We are in it together. And thank you so much, for wishing us that anniversary, Sunila." My next book, and I can see Joanne talking about another book that's a wonderful complement to this one. And yes, indeed, we have it in our bazaar coming up, and I will talk about it at that point in time. But yes, it's a perfect complement. The story that you're referring to is a perfect complement to, Who Will Rule, definitely. The next book, and an absolute favorite, and something that we've recommended right through in so many bazaars, Mukand and Riaz by Nina Sabnani. What a beautiful book it is, about two friends who have shared histories, shared memories, shared crafts as well, but who get separated by the drawing of one single line that divided India and Pakistan so many decades ago. That is the partition of India. Of course, the story of Mukand. There's the two boys in the book are Mukand and Riaz, who live in Karachi and who enjoy the sights and sounds and smells and treats that Karachi has to offer. And just for two young children, the very best of friends, who suddenly one day have to get separated because a military van comes and stops on the street. An English soldier jumps out and tells the boys to go home. You can see that Nina Sabnani, who has written and illustrated this book, the illustrations are done out of fabric, and she is a master, creator of these beautiful images using shared crafts that come to us both from Pakistan and India. That is, from Pakistan, and maybe the Gujarati crafts. The similarity of these illustrations of the crafts that she's used from Sindh in Pakistan and Gujarat in India. Now, what happens when the soldiers tell them to go away? Of course, Ria suddenly realizes that Mukund has to leave the country, and helps. What does he do? How does he help him get across the border? Of course, in the course of writing the book, Nina does poignantly tell us that the Mukund of the story is none other than her father, and that's how she knows this wonderful tale. It's a book that has got to be in every single house, in every single school, and in the hands of all children and adults who know that crossing borders and building bridges is the only way forward in this world. Mutama saying this is my all-time favorite book, and that Google had an ad based on this. I wonder if they credited the book, and she's expressing her love for Nina Sabnani for sharing this wonderful story, having heard many such stories from her family in Punjab as well. This one published by Tulika, priced at 150 rupees, meant for 5+ year olds. Okay, so Sham's telling me that the site has been updated. Look at the top of the site, the book voucher, that entitles you to a 15% discount, which is FR15, has already been activated. Thank God we've got tech support like this with us at Funky Rainbow. So those of you who can't wait to order some of the books, please go right ahead. But remember, there are lots of wonderful recommendations coming up. Our next book, is again, I think, a bazaar that talks on peace would be incomplete without books on Malala. And this is a beautiful picture book called Malala's Magic Pencil. It is written by Malala Yousafzai herself, the youngest winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, and illustrated by Kera Scoet. It's a beautiful story. What is Malala's magic pencil about? And many of us have had these magic pencil stories. We've listened to a lot of these magic pencil stories, and it begins with, Malala as a young girl asking all of us if we believe in magic. Indeed, we do. And what does she do with her pencil? When somebody is hungry, she draws a bowl of curry for them to eat. If someone was in danger, she draws a police officer, and who can help the two of them. But as she grows up, and there are people in her country who don't want her to get an education, who don't want her to go to school, the very school that her parents are really keen to send her to, and to which she's been going. She what does she do? She realizes that that magic pencil is now a very real pencil in her hands, and starts to write her own story. Starts to write the story of her people, and she starts to write about why peace should always make its way through every situation of conflict. So what happens to that magic pencil? Is that magic pencil now the most powerful weapon in the hands of a young girl like Malala? It's a simple picture book, juxtaposes fantasy and reality so beautifully, and tells you an inspiring story of a one girl's wish for a better world. This one, published by Penguin Random House, priced at 499 rupees, a fabulous book that we'd recommend for 6+ year olds. Tamanna saying, Malala Yousafzai is so cool. I still remember the first time I heard her when I was in the 5th grade. She was such an awe-inspiring person. Indeed, she is, and indeed, her life is testimony to her, amazing courage and amazing guts. Our next recommendation this morning is a beautiful book from Pratham, and I do know that perhaps many of you may have seen this online. We received physical copies just before we went into lockdown on the 27th of April. This one called I Wish, which has a beautiful foreword by Esther Duflo, the Nobel, Prize winner for economics, and Rukmini Banerjee, who is one of the founders of Pratham, talking about, the CEO of Pratham actually, talking about, these two words, I wish, that hold within them the hope and power to make a better world. And what is lovely about this book is that Pratham has collaborated. I mean, the book, which has been art directed by Priya Kurian, the one and only Priya Kurian, has brought together illustrations, has brought together different illustrators of Pratham who've illustrated each spread. And you can look at this first one by the incomparable Rajiv Ipe, which is a group of children saying, I wish for the freedom to speak. Mujhe bolne ki azadi chahiye. And each of these wishes are true wishes, that different children across the country have recorded, and the Pratham team taking some of those wonderful wishes and compiling them into a book. I love the second one, and which is why we put it into this bazaar. And of course, there's got to be every reason to put it into this bazaar. It says, in fact, the first wish is by a 14-year-old girl called Bandana Devi from Haji Public School, Jammu and Kashmir. And the second one, which I want to show you, it says, I wish there were no borders, no boundaries, by Kunal Raj Purohit, 14, from the Fab India School in Rajasthan. And this one illustrated by the very talented Manjari Chakravarti. These may seem as deceptively simple wishes, but they are indeed full of hope and promise of a better future. I know it's possible to read the book on Storyweaver, but for those of you who want to keep the copy, as I can see, Muttama wants to, we please do consider picking it up from Funky Rainbow, priced at 70 rupees, and the version that we have is bilingual, English and Hindi. I Wish, Mary Arzu. And of course, Muttama, no reason why this wonderful book should not be at your home, where you have an Arzu right in your midst. Preeti Ramchandran saying, inspirational for sure. Our kids would probably now say, I wish we could go back to school soon. You know what? We wish for it too. We wish we could go back to school with all our colorful books and, be in the midst of children. Nothing more lovely than that. So I second that wish that any and every child must be making. Our next recommendation this morning is again a fairly new book from Tulika, which is called Noon Chai and a Story, written by the incredible author Aditi Rao, whose books we absolutely love at Funky Rainbow, and illustrated by Ghazal Kadri, who I believe lives in the US but is from Kashmir herself. So it is an own voices illustrator illustrating this beautiful story that comes to us from Gurez in Kashmir. And what about Gurez? And again, these books, they're not absolutely telling you a story of war and conflict, but the suggestion certainly is there in this in this book, which is the story of two young girls who love being in a library. And you can see that's how the story begins. An uncle from far away comes and shows them a whole host of books which they enjoy reading. And he tells them that a library is indeed a bank of books. And he lets them spend some time reading those books, but he has to leave when summer passes, and he has to go back to where he came from, which means the library is closed. And in Gurez, where these two girls live, and Gurez, Aditi Rao tells us, is really close to the line of control, in Kashmir. the two girls go, one of them, actually one of those girls, goes back to her grandmother, rather forlorn that there's probably not going to be books to read now. And this little girl Amia, she starts talking with her Dedi, and Dedi is grandmother, and you can see the really lovely Dedi in this story, who is at that point in time making some noon chai. And she says, I know, grandmom says, can I help you? Her Dedi says, can I help you? How can I help you? And she says, oh, you're so old Dedi, how will you help? You can't. And then suddenly, like all grandmothers can, Dedi comes up with a fabulous idea. There are so many stories in her sparkling eyes, there are so many stories in her head. And Amia and her Amia's sister, is, loves to illustrate. So she says, how about us creating our own books? What a lovely idea. What happens to Amia? What happens to Hassa? What happens to Dedi? And that glorious pink noon chai. Here I'm showing you a picture of that buttery yummy noon chai. What role does that play in this story, which has a hint of conflict but shows us that books always shining through any conflict? It's a beautiful book, and we would recommend it for 5+ year olds. Priced at 175 rupees from Tulika. And I do know that the author did, Aditi Rao has done a reading on her social media pages of a small part of this story. So you should check it out if this one interests you. But I'd say, check that out and pick up the book. Our next recommendation for this morning, and it is a book, again, from Tulika, called Red. What is the story of Red all about? It's red, which represents the red of conflict, of war, of battle. There's a little boy, in the story, who, he runs and plays around the winding lanes in his house. And he finds one day, while running around and playing, a lovely red kite, which he picks up and starts to play with as well. And you know what, he's thrilled because red is indeed his favorite color, so he names the kite Red. And the boy runs with the kite fluttering behind him. What a glorious feeling that is for all of us who've experienced it, really. But suddenly, and where Red is so happily, flying against a blue sky, there's so much peace, there's so much happiness, and there's so much fun in his life. But then suddenly, the color of the sky changes. And I'm just going to show you this picture and stop at that, simply because you know why the color of the sky is changing and what happens to Red, what happens to the little boy. How it in just through pictures, telling you so much about how armed conflict devastates the lives of people who live in that region, especially children. So pertinent today, when we know that Israel and Palestine battling, right in the middle of a world that's battling with corona. I know children, get to know this news. I know children hear bits and pieces of these news, of this kind of news, and this kind of perhaps disturbing news. The best way to introduce and start conversations, with them, is by using these books that talk about conflict so well to children, holding up a ray of hope. Finally, this one we'd recommend for 6+ year olds, priced at 200 rupees. Our next book, in equally the same sort of somber, tone, is written by Bijal Vajrajani and illustrated by Shrujana Sridhar, called That Night. Shrujana Niranjani Sridhar, called That Night. Well, what is the story of that night? It is a dark night. And you can see the picture in this book, about a dark night where a child is quite scared because she wakes up to the sound of angry voices. little Nunu, who is the protagonist of this book, initially clutches her blanket closer, but then gets quite scared by those voices, angry, shouting, loud voices at the dead of the night, that she goes to the balcony and she can see her mother standing on the balcony. And why those loud, angry voices are echoing in the night. Well, it's a riot, and it is it is a rather chilling riot. It is a riot between people of two different religious groups, and you just wonder what is why do we riot? What is the point in rioting? And why should you discriminate people on the basis of religion? It's very, very nicely done. It's a chilling tale. I can see Joanne saying that it's a chilling story, but the unfortunate truth for so many. And yes, our children do know of it. They have experienced buns, they have experienced lockdowns, and I think these lovely sensitive books tell you so much about how the world is fed by fear and intolerance when there's really no reason to be that way. This one, published by Pratham, priced at 45 rupees. That is, I think these are two books that, for the younger readers, that really portray the brutality of violence, not in not not depicting it visually, but sort of suggesting it, and telling you, to help us come to terms with the fact that the world is divided, but of course, always holding out a ray of hope. I can see Pooja Ailavadi saying that it's a nice book. It is indeed a very, very relevant one for our times. From this book, I moved to a book that brought me so much joy when I looked at it. And, simply because I had never even known that, Leo Tolstoy, the author of this wonderful book with such a wonderful title that says, Little Girls Are Wiser Than Men. And Leo Tolstoy, I think, so poignant, War and Peace, really, right? But this one has been adapted for children from a Leo Tolstoy story and illustrated by Hassan Zahraddin. Now, what a fabulous handcrafted book this is. You've just, Tara's books bringing so much joy, so much happiness to all of us. It's a letterpressed book. Means, printing in a good old fashioned, hand printed manner. So this one, what is the story all about? And I showed you the first illustration because it was story. The story is set in Easter, just an early Easter. And it's the story of two little girls who are very good friends. And what about them? They, their mothers dress them up, and Malashka, who's the younger girl, wearing a blue dress, and I did show you that a picture, and Akulka, who wore a yellow dress, who's the older of the two kids. Now, what do they want to do? They're all dressed up and they decide to go and splash about in a puddle. Of course, children being children will enjoy splashing in a puddle, but while they're splashing in the puddle, the one child splashes water on the other child's nose, eyes, and clothes. Well, the other child does the same thing too. And well, I think they may not have had that much, trouble with splashing water on each other. But when they go back and tell their mothers, before we know it, the children get into a disagreement, the mothers get into a disagreement, and then the entire village is up in arms. But you have to read this, glorious book. And I can see Joanne saying this book is precious. The story, the illustration, the print technique, the paper, the whole production, such a perfect book, really. You have to read it to find out why little girls are so much wiser than men. It's an absolutely charming book. Please read it to your children, gift it to anyone that you want to gift it to. The next time there's like an important function, don't buy that clock or don't buy that. Consider picking up these beautiful giftable books, because I think they just brighten up people's lives. Like I said, it was adapted from a poetic short story by the great Russian writer Leo Tolstoy. And it is a fabulous story about conflict and the resolution of that conflict. As I said, handcrafted books, and you can see that the edition that I'm holding up over here says 204 out of 2000 copies that are printed, which means every copy a masterpiece. It has a little booklet that comes for parents and teachers and librarians about how you can explore this book and open some wonderful discussions with your children around this story and the theme of the story. Priced at 800 rupees, it's an absolute keeper for a lifetime. And I'm just, so careful. You can see it's come in this lovely cloth bag, no plastic packaging here from the house of Tara. And you just put the book back into this beautiful cloth bag. Hopefully not, because you have it open and reading always, but such a lovely book on conflict and the resolution of that conflict. So, of course, we do. Let me say hello to so many friends who've joined us from, on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Instagram. I'm just quickly going to say a round of hellos before I go back into my recommendations. This time, I'm going to finish up my recommendations before our guest for the day joins us. So, a quick round of hellos to many of you: Joanne Saldana, Kripa, Book Pickle, Appu Sambandan, Sulekha, Anjani Rajgopal, Archana Atri, Mirunalin, Eureka Children's Books. What a pleasure to see you here, Swati and Venki. I hope you're doing well, and I do hope our bookshops will open up soon enough for us to send these wonderful books here, there, everywhere. Rupa Baliga, Parag Sen, Tamanna Sen, Arzu Riki, Shweta Jagannathan, Gauri Shekhar. Gauri Shekhar, I hope you know that that discount voucher is up now, and if you would like to pick up the Robert Sabuda book, please go right ahead. Muttama Devaya, who really should be at this office and not watching us on a screen, but at the moment, because we are locked down, doing it across computers. Arundhati Nath, Simbi, Annapurna Das, Vijay Lakshmi Nagaraj, Rimjim Priyadarshini Tandan, Drishti Tyagi, Preeti Ramachandran. So delighted to see familiar friends and new names in the list today. Sunila Kulkarni Gupte, Aarti Muttanna Singh, CG Salamander, Ranju. Make magic happen. And yes, we do need magic to happen in this world right now. Shantag, Rupaya's Toys and Stationery, The Little Readers, Stories from Stone, Arvind Carnelian, Subramaniam Rohan, Pinky Venki 210, Debasmita Das Gupta joining us all the way from Singapore. What a pleasure that you're here at this bazaar. We love your illustrations, Debasmita, and glad to see you after a long time. C.A. Pooja Ailavadi, Santosh Sebastian, Satish Sundaram, lovely to see you here too. Old friend watching another old friend recommending books, but what a pleasure to have someone from school and who's presently working with Westland Books watching us. Manjari Shukla and Anubha 1005. Thank you for joining us at the bazaar this morning. Like I said, it's the first anniversary of our bazaar, 1 year of facilitating discovery of Indian children's books, 1 year of discovering these books through all your eyes. What a pleasure it is to be doing this. And I can't believe that a year has gone past. We are here and doing this today and talking about these books simply because of how much you've all been cheering us from the sidelines, and because how many of you have supported us by buying books from us across this year. It has literally kept the wheels of our traveling bookshop turning in these really challenging times. And a shout out, I know many indie booksellers going through the same crisis. Find the indie booksellers in your city. They are waiting to send books to you. They're waiting to recommend books to you. And do support indie booksellers, because their dil, jaan, and their entire soul is in what they do. Thank you again to all of you for supporting us. And I will continue with recommendations. I can see Aditi Rao has joined us, and I just wanted to say your lovely, lovely Noon Chai book in our bazaar on giving peace a chance. What a sensitive, with what a sensitive story with a hint of conflict thrown into it, and what a beautiful resolution to that. To that conflict. Devika Rangachari is saying, that's wonderful. A whole year. You're truly amazing and inspiring. Vidya and the team at Funky Rainbow. Yes, this is entirely a team effort. If it's possible for me to sit here and talk about the books, it's because Mutama and Sham and Sujita and Bharti doing so much to make this possible, ordering these books at times of lockdown, putting them up online, making sure that the book, the weight, and various other details are entered up online, and making them available to you to be shipped here, there, and everywhere. Aditi Rao saying hi. Divya Purandara saying, congratulations to FR for 1 year of the Saturday Live Bazaar. Thank you so much. We know it, you have been a huge contributor to the fact that we continue to do this. Rupa Baliga saying, time flies. I can't believe it's a year already. Indeed, it was an idea that came up at the dead of the night one day. I'm a complete owl, driving back home one day when we were locked down the previous year, and suddenly saying, well, we just need to recommend books. We need to find people online and recommend these books, and calling both Muttama and Sham at some absolutely insane hour of the night. I assure you, it was well past the witching hour, perhaps closer to 1 in the night, and saying, well, I think this is what we need to do. I think this is what is going to work for us. Now you guys have to figure how we're going to do this. And the two of them admirably rising to this occasion, and, putting this whole show together for us. I can see Archana Atri saying, Dil, Jaan and Dhadkan. Yaar, my God, I wish your Hindi was my gift. How perfectly filmy and appropriate. Yes, indeed, it is really. I'm going to move on to, a clutch of more recommendations. Again, a series that actually we started our bazaar last year on the 23rd of May, focusing on the theme of home, because we had all been locked down at home, and home had started to play such a big role in our lives. And I remember this was the first set of books that we introduced 1 year ago. So glad that we're doing it exactly 1 year later, but in another context and in another theme, which just goes to show how powerful and how wonderful some Indian children's books can be, and how many situations you can use them in to start conversations with your children. Joanne Saldana saying, proud to say that I've been here from Bazaar number 1. Need a badge or t-shirt or some such item to show off. Yes, absolutely. We said we'd try and get this collateral, out to you. And I just hope that in the coming months, we're so caught up with so many things, that we need to do to just get ourselves through these difficult times. But one day when we have, a little bit of time, a lot of that collateral definitely going out. And Sham reminding me that there's a book champion mug. This one, when the lockdown lifts, comes your way, certainly, Joanne Saldana. Sunila Kulkarni saying, how inspiring your story is, Vidya, about how the bazaar came into being. Well, it's just so sweet of you to say that, Sunila Kulkarni. And like I said, back to recommending that first set of books, which I so, so love, called Homebound, Homecoming, and Homeland. This wonderful set of portraits of exile published by Katha, and written and illustrated by Ania Asrani. What is this? What are these books all about? Well, they're a series of books of nonfiction, creative nonfiction, and they're based on the lives of real refugees who live in Bailakuppe in in Karnataka. It's a Tibetan settlement where many refugees, many Tibetans who followed the Dalai Lama to, and left the country, came coming into India, going to Dharmshala, and also coming to live in Bailakuppe. This one, Homebound, specifically, is the story of a young woman refugee. And the book begins with such a lovely quote, which says, "Home is where a family comes together to care and share." And this young lady of 16 tells the story. And of course, you must pick the books up as a trilogy, because each of the refugees telling a poignant story of what it means to leave your home and come away, and what it means to actually make your home in another country and find peace and solace there. Now this one, Homebound, the girl, it begins with a little girl, talking about, about a young girl who's 16, who talks about her brothers leaving home when they were 5 years old. And she says they were going to a faraway country called India to study, to become monks. And look at these collages, look at these stunning, fabulous illustrations, and illustrations woven into photographs to make these fabulous collages. And she talks about how when she was 8, it was time for her to leave the her home too. And there is a hint of, why they're running away from home, why they seem to have to leave home. And then the journeys that they make, the borders that they cross, and the lives that they make for themselves in another country. Such beautiful, moving portraits these are. And I would really recommend every one of you to pick up all these all three books as a set, simply because of the powerful portraits of exile that they contain. Published by Katha, priced at 120 rupees per book. I can see Aditi Rao saying, "Vidyamani, Muttama Devaya, Sham Madhavan Sharada, so proud of you for keeping FR as vital and awesome as ever through the challenges of the pandemic. Thank you so much for helping us do that by writing such wonderful books that we can actually talk about, and the books that we can dip into over and over again to find newer meanings when we look at them every single time." Portraits for Exile, an absolute must. Joanne Saldana saying, "I bought this set when you first recommended Vidya, wrote about them on one of the Bookwalis posts. What a beautiful set it indeed is." And we love those posts that you make as the Bookwalis, analyzing books through your experience and your eyes, for us to learn so much about. Following that book, again, another one that came into our collection just before the lockdown, called The Seed of Compassion: Lessons from the life and teachings of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, written by His Holiness the Dalai Lama himself, and the illustrations by Bao Lu. You know that in the present century, one of the people who has consistently spread the message of a compassionate world, a world where we need to be one and where all of humanity needs to come together, is definitely His Holiness the Dalai Lama. This charming picture book, and we'd recommend it for, I'd say, maybe 7+ year olds, because there is a lot of text on the pages, not that much, but still a little bit more than other picture books, basically. And this one telling the story of the young Dalai Lama, what happened, how did he grow up, what is the family that he came from, how his mother had a huge influence on his life, and what prompted him to become the wise and compassionate Dalai Lama. Of course, there is a seed of compassion, that is sowed into his consciousness by his mother. And you have to read this beautiful story, to find out how, a young boy in Tibet went on to become His Holiness the Dalai Lama, but even more than that, the message of compassion and oneness that the story spreads. This one, published by Penguin, priced at 350 rupees. Sunila Kulkarni saying, and it wasn't available when I wanted them, just shows how good they are. So glad that they are there now. Yes, indeed, the Three Portraits of Exile book, I'd say clubbed with the Seed of Compassion, would be a wonderful way to introduce these books, to talk about, peace, and talk about what does it mean when you don't have a home, when you have to move away from your home and make another country your home? Do you long to go back? Of course you do. And what does that concept of home really mean? Beautiful books to explore the refugee, crisis that a lot of the world is witnessing today as well. From there on, we get on to those wonderful books that Joanne had spoken about just a little before, saying that, one of the stories in this book by Zai Whitaker, a perfect complement to Who Will Rule. These two old books from Tulika, which have been in print and publication for so many decades now, I would imagine at least 20 years. Sorry, Best Friend, and One World. Sorry, Best Friend, easily, like Joanne said, one of the finest anthology of short stories for young readers, introducing them to India as we know it, with all its complexities, with all its diversity, with all its problems, and with all its wonderful things. This anthology, edited by Geeta Hariharan and Shama Futehalli and illustrated by Ranjan De, featuring stories by such fine writers as Zai Whitaker, Poili Sengupta, Shama Futehalli, Geeta Hariharan, Savitri Narayanan, Swapna Datta, and Savan Datta. Such lovely stories. And I do know Joanne spoke about Zai's What Happened to the Reptiles, which is such a perfect complement to Who Will Rule, and such a tongue-in-cheek, delightful story about the way politics, changes things, I mean, how politics influences the world that we live in, and perhaps not exactly in the nicest kind of way, but Zai doing it with characteristic humor. And I can see, Sunila Kulkarni saying such fantastic, deep, and thoughtful books. Indeed, we ourselves discover these each time we look through them, that there are greater and greater layers of meaning that can be used, with children, and you can introduce them to the various layers as adults as they get ready for it. Lovely to see another huge supporter of Funky Rainbow here at joining us at the bazaar just now. Asha Nehmaya saying, Sorry, Best Friend is a wonderful book. And Poili Sengupta's story, The Lights Changed, is one of my favorites. Absolutely, a wonderful anthology that every child, aspiring to grow up, or wanting to know that the very fabric of this country was at one point, really, it was a secular fabric, and we lived on the principles of peace, harmony, unity, and diversity. This is that anthology that you should read to introduce your children, if you want to show them why suspicion and hope should find no place in a democracy. And a partner book to this one is One World, of course. Again, a fabulous anthology of pieces of fiction, non-fiction, and poetry, illustrated by the wonderful late Bindya Thapar, and edited by Radhika Menon and Sandhya Rao from Tulika, featuring writers as from our different languages as well. If We Sell Our Land by Paul Zakaria, very well known writer, Malayali writer. Clear Sky by Ambai. He Dared to Dream, by V. Ram Narayan. Wood for the Trees by Geeta Mehta. Waiting by Ashok Mitran. Again, Poili Sengupta with a fabulous story called The Prankster. This one, which introduces children to both original writing in English and translated work by contemporary writers in India. Such a, sending home a powerful message of why, we are one world, why we should live in peace, and why unity in diversity is the best way to be. The Sorry Best Friend would work for 8+ year olds, definitely priced at 115 rupees. Excuse me. And One World, priced at 185 rupees, meant for 10+ year olds. But these age groups just put down, for so that people figure out what ages they may be working for. You are the best judge of what your child is ready for. And I think every single book we recommend works absolutely well for adults as well. Aditi Rao saying One World is an absolutely must read. It definitely is. We need to believe today that we are one world. And Sunila saying that Sorry Best Friend and One World, these two books are such timeless classics. They indeed are. And I know it's probably in about 10 minutes or so that we're going to welcome our guests. So I'll share with you a beautiful book that I just read, 2 weeks ago, called The Blackbird Girls. I mean, this is again a Western children's book in our collection, but I just love the setting of the story by Anne Blankman. It is set in Ukraine, and it is set in, right where the Chernobyl disaster is going to happen. I mean, we of course know, having, read about the terrible nuclear explosion, one of the world's worst disasters, where the nuclear power plant in Chernobyl, causing, I mean, sort of exploding and absolutely wrecking devastation and havoc in the lives of the people who lived around this nuclear reactor. But what is this a story of? It's the story of two young girls, their neighbors, Valentina and Oksana, who wake up one morning to an angry red sky. And they know that the reactor, that's where their fathers work, the reactor at the nuclear power plant has exploded. I mean, what a fabulous setting for a story, to showcase the tragedy in the lives of people, that happens because of these disasters. Now, these two girls traditionally always been enemies. And you know what happens? Because they have to escape from that place, they have to get on a train and head off to Leningrad to be with the grandmother of one of the girls. What happens in the story? What happens when they reach Leningrad? What happens when they live with the grandmother of one of the girls, that is actually Valentina's grandmother? And how do they discover that friendship, is perhaps the power of friendship, can absolutely, end all hatred, all intolerance, all oppression. It was such a fantastic and powerful read. And the blackbird of the title, the eponymous blackbird of the title, you must know the blackbird itself is a symbol of friendship and, a symbol of faith. What a lovely book. I thoroughly enjoyed reading this one, 2 weeks ago. And just felt that in this one, I mean, it doesn't talk about a war, but it's certainly a conflict between two friends. I mean, a friend, I mean, two girls who were enemies to start off with. And what happens? Does this disaster make them friends? Priced at 399 rupees, uh, published by Penguin. We would recommend this for 10+ year olds. Aditi Rao saying, teaching it in my creative writing classes right now. I'm assuming she's talking about about Sorry Best Friend and One World, and saying that there are such honest and moving pieces in there. Tamanna asking, where is No Guns at My Son's Funeral? Definitely going to come up. In fact, our guest of the day has listed that as one of her favorite books, so she's probably going to talk about it. And asking again, am I old enough to read The Blackbird Girls? Never, never too old, or never too young to read a wonderful book like this one, Tamanna. I'm going to recommend, Sham, do we have some time? Okay, I'm going to recommend a clutch of other books quickly before our guest for the day comes in. A bazaar on giving peace a chance would be incomplete without this lovely anthology called A Clear Blue Sky: Stories and Poems on Conflict and Hope. Again, a wonderful anthology with contributors like, I know one of them watching us here this morning, Asha Nehmaya, A Time to Mend. And I do know that on her social media pages, she has put up a video of her reading the story, A Time to Mend. What a powerful, wonderful, hopeful story it is. There's Gulzar with the growing pangs of 9-year-old Faraz. There's Paru Anand with the new game. There's Bulbul Sharma with Friends Forever, and Aditi Rao too, who's watching us here today with Turban for a Little Boy, and Poili Sengupta with her powerful story called Oranges. Really a fantastic anthology that, and different writers having picked different conflicts, whether it's 2611 or whether it is 911 or it is 7/7. And I know each one of these dates when some terror was sort of wreaked havoc upon different countries in the world. These stories telling you, offering you rays of hope, in a world that is fraught with violence and conflict. And each one, I mean, talking about why we should not let religion or race or caste or simply just some mindsets divide us, because we are indeed one people and one world. This one, A Clear Blue Sky, I think, and must read for adults as well. I mean, you're going to enjoy every one of the stories in this collection. We would recommend this for 13 plus year olds, published by Penguin, priced at 199 rupees. Of course, like I said, all of these books up in our bazaar. Please click on our website, www.funkyrainbow.com. Click on the tab that says Book Bazaar. The first drop down item will be War and Peace. The books that we're recommending, and so many others that so many of you have been mentioning in the course of our chat, featured there. Do consider picking them up from Funky Rainbow should you think you might enjoy reading them. Joanne Saldana saying, I loved Asha's story, really made me pause, reflect, and question my unconscious biases. What a lovely way, a turn of phrase, unconscious biases. Most of the times, us adults not knowing that we are passing on these biases to our children without even thinking about it. A fabulous book to dispel such biases, make you pause and think and understand that a diverse and unified world and a peaceful world is our only hope for the future. There's Wanting More, of course, a wonderful book by Ruxana Khan, again meant for young adults, about a little girl called Jamila, whose mother dies and who is now left alone with her moody father. The father suddenly decides that they're going to leave their small village in Afghanistan, which is where they lived, I mean, and move to Kabul, where he wants to start a new life. But what about Jamila? She struggles because she's, from a small place to a big city. She has to deal with a strange culture. She has to deal with unfamiliar people. She has to deal with a hostile new family with whom they've gone in to live. And, she is living in the midst of a war ravaged city, feeling alone and vulnerable. What happens? How does Jamila find friendship? How does she find the strength to accept what happened to her, the loss of her mother? And how does she find hope to go on in this life? It's a beautiful book. It's part of Duckbill's Not Our War series. And I know that there are other books in the series as well, like The White Zone and When Morning Comes, all of them up in our bazaar on War and Peace. And this one by Ruxana Khan, who lives in Canada at the moment, is the winner of the Middle East Book Award in the youth fiction category in 2009. And all the Not Our War books, showing us how conflict and how violence reduces us to sometimes to being powerless, to being vulnerable, and yet shows us why, many of us, and oftentimes more than the adults, the children, who are brave and hopeful, and they know that, there is a better future that lies ahead if we adopt peace. This one priced at 250 rupees. I think our guest for the day, is she in, Sham? Okay, all right. So we, she's 5 hours, 5.5 hours behind us. So give us, 5 minutes this way, that way to, so Nainika can be up with a cup of coffee joining us at the bazaar. And of course, because Tamanna, you asked for Paro Anand's book, the one that I'm going to recommend, and I think the one that you can definitely read if you haven't read yet, is this excellent collection called Like Smoke by Paro Anand. The story of 20 different teenagers, and, each of these teenagers telling, there's very likely that every teenager reading these stories is, likely to see herself or himself in these, in these stories. And in this collection of 20 stories, Paro Anand taking you into the battle zone of 20 young people who are absolutely on that precipice where they have to make choices. They are, plagued with dilemmas of different kinds, whether it's heartache, whether it's conflict, whether it's friendship, whether it's love. And, they demonstrate such courage, they demonstrate such hope, they demonstrate that love conquers everything. It is a fabulous collection of stories that we'd recommend for 13 plus year olds. And, it's not, just only about you. In this, the stories are not just only about someone like you, but about many different kinds of yous that you can see all over the country. Paro Anand, of course, rightfully winning the Sahitya Academy, the Sahitya Academy's Bal Sahitya Puraskar in 2017, and has many books, situated in Kashmir, like No Guns, like Nomad's Land, all of them telling wonderful stories of conflict and why young people hold the hope in our world yet. I think Nayanika is here. I can see Sunila, Vijay Lakshmi saying, have been through 3 wars in 1962, 1965, and 1971, staying in Shillong. We were evacuated to a safer place in 62. My parents and the 4 children, 65 and 71, going through difficult, times of conflict, but emerging a strong, powerful writer and storyteller subsequently. What a lovely story that is. Sunila Gupta saying, Like Smoke is a must read. And the vulnerability of some of the teenagers in that book really just breaks your heart. Sohini Mitra, how lovely that you've joined us from Penguin. You're saying Paro's upcoming book releasing next month. Stay tuned. Do send it to us the soonest that you can, because we would definitely love to feature it in the bazaar. Vijay Lakshmi talking about the bunkers in which they had to hide, and for hours and hours, surviving on a loaf of bread, stories of toughness and resilience that really carry us forward in all these books. We had a clutch of other books to recommend to you, but I know they're all up on the on the bazaar, www.funkyrainbow.com. Do click on the tab that says Book Bazaar, and the first drop down menu will be War and Peace. All the books in there, that you can check out, dealing with the theme of conflict and peace. There is Deepa Agarwal's Kashmir, which we were going to talk about, a fabulous collection of stories, and 2 books that are set in the Dongria Kond community. Again, stories of conflict and, stories that hold the promise of hope. Siddhartha Sharma's Year of the Weeds, which is the winner of the Neve Book Award in 2019, and Unga by Devashish Makhija, which is the novelized form of his 2013 film, both set in a community fighting for its own freedom and its rights. These were the ones that we were going to recommend, but I shall now, welcome our guest this morning, afternoon for us, but a bright morning in London for her. I hope Nenika Mehtani, who joins us to talk about her book, about all her books, but especially Across the Line. I want to tell my friends on Instagram that we can't live stream this conversation on Instagram. So please do join us on Funky Rainbow's Facebook channel or on our YouTube channel to watch this wonderful conversation with Nainika Mehtani, who's just joining us. Good morning, Nainika. Can I see that cup of coffee? It's
I've already had it with you. So lovely
Just
to
hang
see
on a
you.
second. I'm not able to hear you. Just hang on 1 second. That's probably my machine. I'm going to just try to. Can you say something, Nanika?
Hi Vidya, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely fine. Now my machine just acting up as usual. A very, very good morning to you, Nanika. And
Thank you. Good afternoon to you all, and thank you for accommodating it so I could get half an hour to have my coffee.
I have to say, it's just so lovely that, I mean, for me, bravery is getting up in the morning and, being on a show, talking to so many people who are watching us, because I'm a complete night owl and I'm not sure I'd have been this bright and cheery at 7:30 in the morning, Nanika.
I wouldn't have either. It's for you, Vidya.
I have to trade this secret with you and figure out what it is to, be bright in the morning. But, ladies and gentlemen, delighted to present, a wonderful friend and a lovely writer in the Indian children's publishing space, Nainika Mehtani, who has some who sent us such a lovely bio note of what she does. She says she once harbored dreams of becoming a stage actor, but then ended up doing an MBA at the Indian Institute of Management in Bangalore and went on to become an investment banker. But a couple of years, or maybe a decade down the line, she decided that she was going to make, and she says, a slight change of career, and decided to write books for children as well as, become a screenwriter to write movies. The thing is, Nainika's books, all of them published by Penguin Random House, have been so well received. And I do know that, we've done sessions with her when she traveled to Bangalore when the world was normal and people did not have to travel on the internet superhighway, doing sessions around some of her wonderful books, which she will talk to us in the course of this conversation. All of them, keeping children quite riveted and quite gripped. And, we do know that every one of them featuring conflict of one kind or the other. But of course, we're going to primarily talk about her latest book, which is probably a year old now, isn't it, Nanika?
That's
Maybe a
right.
year
That's
old.
right. November 2019.
Across the Line, and we'll we'll have Nainika talk to us about it. But what has been special, and this is the world in which, this is the way in which the world moves in unexpected ways. Nainika has somehow been part of so many birthdays of ours. I know. When
Absolutely. I
she
feel
was
so blessed and privileged to have that.
she was here, when she was here to, do some sessions around her book, The Gory Story of Genghis Khan. It also happened to be 1 July, which was Funky Rainbow's birthday. And we met up with writer Rupa Pai, and the two of them had a bunch of children absolutely regaled about books, stories, and why we should all be readers in one way or the other. So, really, blessed we are that you're here at the first birthday of our bazaar. Coincidentally, I
I
mean,
know. Fabulous. Kudos to you to have done this, honestly.
and I think, and I'm sure Muttama and Sham and my colleagues Bharti and Sujita will agree, you must be our good luck charm, and I hope a couple of years down the line when we're celebrating another important birthday that you're there with us. Muttama saying the kids cherish the memory of the high tea with Nainika and Rupa at Cafe Terra. This was our birthday celebration that year, indeed. So I'm going to, start off by asking you this question, Nanika. I mean, a management graduate from IMB Bangalore, an investment banker, an advertising copywriter. From there to storyteller, author, screenwriter, is there really anything that you can't do?
Well, you ask my daughters, they'll have a long list of everything I can't do. But it all sounds like I had this grand plan to, have my life, have all these different portfolios of experiences. But it really wasn't like that, Vidya. It was sort of, I mean, I always loved storytelling. And so when I was about 17 or 18, what I really wanted to do, as you said, was act in musical theater. And I joined drama school. My dad was posted in New Delhi at the time. After having grown up in Calcutta, we moved to New Delhi for a few years. So I was always a sort of outsider because we always had postings. I was always the new kid in school, or so I think for me, theater was also just a way of fitting in, or just, I was a shy kid on the outside for a long time. So it was something I really loved doing. And when I told my dad that I want to sort of, study drama, I had joined a theater action school in action group in Delhi, where Shah Rukh Khan also at the time was,
Wow.
he was senior, but he was one of those people who was sort of very much on the scene over there. Barry John, of course, runs the group. I loved that world. And I was like, oh my God, this is what I really want to do. And my father turned around and said, this, will it really put food on the table? And well, I was like, how you are, you're 18 or whatever. And he says, that doesn't matter. And he said, you know what, why don't you try doing something which gives you the financial freedom to then choose whatever you want in life? And I don't think I must have moped for a few days and whatever, but then I just got on with things. And I, as you said, then I went to IIM Bangalore, and then after that I was an investment banker. And I didn't do it sort of, I wasn't heartbroken at the time, I have to say. I went on with life. I'm still a very go with the flow kind of person. And I actually am very grateful to him for that advice, because I think each experience actually informs the future. It's not like any experience is ever sort of, oh my God, that was a waste. At least not, I don't see it that way.
Right.
And
Mm.
so when life went on, and then we moved to Africa, my husband's job took us to Africa. And at that time, I was working with JP Morgan Chase. In Africa, in Nigeria, we didn't have an office. JP Morgan Chase didn't have an office. So, I was without work for a bit, and I auditioned with Sesame Street to write for them, online, even then online. And that work got selected. I started writing for them, for their outreach program, actually, for children who didn't have access to television. And I loved it. And from there, because I had just had my first child, and I didn't have a support system in Africa, so I couldn't really look for a full-time job again. So it just kind of became something I did to fill my time. And I wrote, and I got copywriting assignments. And from there, of course, then I wrote again my first book, Ambushed, for my children. I didn't write with the sort of uh, aspiration that I'm never going to become a published author or anything like that. But it was thanks to Penguin and Shohini,
Who's watching you
who,
today?
who,
Who's here
yes,
watching you? Yes.
who believed in my story, and sort of gave book space to my aspirations, shelf space to my aspirations. And so from there, other books followed. And then the film script also followed. Like, it was never a planned thing. So the joke in the family is that at the beginning of every decade, I'm at the bottom of a new learning curve. So from I'm always like the oldest person doing the newest things.
Lovely, lovely. Always stay on that learning curve. But you just started talking about your books, and Ambushed, which is like a really gripping adventure of two youngsters, Tara and Satya, who try to save her, a tigress and her cubs from being poached in Ranthambore, which means there's like a human animal conflict at the crux of that story. And then there was gory story of Genghis Khan. I know we have all these books up here, and I know we have the images as well, which demystifies the life and times of one of the most feared Mongol warriors in history, again with war and battle at its crux. So in a sense, conflict and the resolution of this conflict in your two early books as well, right?
That's right. I think, Vidya, for me, um, I feel that addressing different points of view, and in my case, I think when I write, firstly, I don't think stories I choose. I think stories choose me. And at each point in life, a certain story chooses you because that is something, maybe it's a conflict that you have to even resolve within yourself. So especially, I mean, of course, with Ambushed, it's a man versus nature kind of conflict. And I think we were all getting so consumed with the online world, adults, children, everybody, that we were ignoring the real world. We were just consumed with this virtual world, ignoring the real world, which can be so beautiful, so thrilling, better than any video game. So this little girl, Tara, who is in Bombay, and she wants to, go to Disneyland and all these holidays that are so sort of artificial, because her whole school is doing that. The class is all going to Disneyland, and her father, who was a banker, hint hint, and now wants to become, a photographer with National Geographic. He says, let's go to Rantham, this place for a holiday, Rani Bagh. And she's like, really? I mean, who's even heard of Rani Bagh? So everything has to be an Instagram story, otherwise it's not real, right?
Yeah.
And then they go on this holiday, and she stumbles upon a gang of poachers, and her only ally is this mysterious boy who's the son of a poacher himself. And they have to save the lives of a tigress and her three cubs, and they're up against this international gang of poachers. Will they save the day? So this whole thing about the conflict, about us in our minds also ignoring the joys and thrills of the natural world because we're all caught up in whatever we're doing. And similarly with Genghis Khan, it's the conflict between, you know, everybody today is getting so polarized. So everybody has to have a point of view, and it's my way or the highway. It's so even in the case of history, for example, which is historical fiction, Genghis Khan, or even across the line for that instance, it what sort of consumed me was, why can nobody accommodate another point of view? So you may think Genghis Khan was this most terrible, bloodthirsty tyrant, and he was, but there was another aspect to him which was lesser known. That he upheld religious freedom, that he upheld equality for women, that he never had a single tomb or anything made in his name. Everything that he looted and collected was done to sort of revitalize the Silk Route and to get Mongolia on the map. And there's so many aspects to each person. It's not unidirectional, and that's the way life is. So when even at dinner tables now in everywhere around the world, everyone just wants to have their opinion. Nobody wants to listen to anybody else anymore. And for me, that is disturbing. We're not tolerant anymore of opinions that don't match our own, and that is to me really sad. I just want to say, I was reading this, every Sunday we go to the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan in London, because my daughter learns to play the flute over there. And while she's playing the flute, I am in their library going through books. And I came across this letter that Gandhi had written to Hitler. Okay, now imagine the divergence in their points of view. But it's such a, um, I mean, it was almost a joy to see that there is communication that is respectful. And he says to him that, we obviously come from very different schools of thought. But even if you win this war and, carry on doing what you're doing, what you're actually achieving is you're winning because your power of destruction is greater than the other person's. What else are you winning? You're not winning on any other count.
Yeah.
And that really spoke to me.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yes, absolutely. So well said. That, yeah, what are you finally winning when you win a war? Certainly worth thinking about. What are you doing when when there's a riot or a band or some kind of strife in your own country? You're just dividing people for no rhyme or reason, really, when we all actually live together and want to live together and do things together. Of course, from there you went on to this most powerful book that came out last year, Across the Line, which is set against the backdrop of the partition in India, and tells just a spectacular story of two young people, Jay and Inaya, who show us how there are more things that unite us rather than divide us, right? And you have the book is peppered with cricket. I mean, cricket is such an important story in it. So is food and family, and two young people who really show us that there is a hope for a world without war, where peace prevails. Why don't you tell us, our viewers, something about the book and what inspired you to write this one?
So, Vidya, again, like I think this book came to me because it kind of prepared me for the pandemic in a sense, I think. But I think the seed for it came from an unfinished conversation with my grandfather. Um, and this kind of brought me closure. And at the time, I was contracted after Genghis Khan to write another book on historical fiction, but every time I sat to write, that book wouldn't come to me. And so I talked to my editor, Shoini, and I said, I'm not able to write that book. Every time I sit down to write, there's another story that is coming. And she was kind enough to say, okay, whatever, go ahead. Of course, I told her the brief and she said, all right, this is fine. We can do this story instead. She was really, really lovely in that respect. So I think it went back to a time when I was about 11 years old, and we had gone to visit my grandparents, and my grandfather every afternoon. So both sets of my grandparents had actually come across the border in the partition, and every afternoon my grandfather used to read to us, my brother and I, and he would read in Urdu because that's the language he had studied. And so I would choose a book and he would read. And so one day I just took this book out of his study, and he looked at the cover and he hesitated for a while, and then he said, okay, this is a book by Manto, a collection of short stories, and the story I'm going to read to you is called Toba Tek Singh. And I said, okay, what's it about? And he said, well, it's set a few years after the partition, and it's set in a lunatic asylum. And at this point I was like, okay. Then he said, so now the governments of India and Pakistan have decided to exchange their lunatics on the same basis as they exchanged the rest of their people. So all the Hindu lunatics will go to India from Pakistan, and all the Muslim lunatics will go to Pakistan from India. And at this point, I was like, okay, this is really such a weird concept for a story. But there was nothing else to do, so I was okay listening. Of course, Manto's dark satire as to who actually were the lunatics was lost on me at that point. But I was listening to him telling this story. My brother was younger and he went off to play. This was like too bizarre for him. And halfway through, my grandfather, he just started sobbing. He stopped talking and he started sobbing. And I didn't know what to do. So I went to call my grandmother. And she came and she saw him. And then I remember her comforting him like he was a little child. And she said to him in Punjabi, she said, Mitti pao, which means let it go, bury it. And I didn't know what they were talking about. I was watching from the doorway. But I do remember that evening I hid that book because I never wanted to see my grandfather cry again. This was this man who, had fought in the freedom struggle and had gone to jail with Gandhi and Nehru. And, he was just this larger than life person for me. I had never seen him cry. But what really gnaws at me is that through my life, through his life, I never once asked him what caused those tears. And I think it just later, and I couldn't find the words then. And when I did find the words, it was too late to have that conversation with him. But what struck me was that entire generation, this was one person, my grandfather, but there were 14 million people who were impacted by the partition, who became refugees overnight. 1 million people died, and nobody spoke about it because I think independence and partition coincided, and independence took center stage. So all that grief had nowhere to go. They didn't have the luxury of grief. So they just sort of buried it deep inside, and they picked up the pieces and they moved on. And I felt that this book maybe was my attempted tribute to a whole generation of what I called quiet heroes on both sides of the border.
Absolutely.
Bangladesh, Pakistan, India. There was this whole generation that, and you know, now in the pandemic, we talk about, okay, we're locked inside our houses for a year, we haven't been able to go out. Imagine these people. They weren't locked inside houses. They witnessed this absolutely cataclysmic upheaval in their lives. They lost homes, families, loved ones. They, with the clothes on their back, they've gone across, maybe been killed on the way, witnessed rape and bloodshed of an unprecedented level. And yet, never once in their life, in all four of them, my four grandparents, never once did they talk about anything with rancor. It was always good memories because I think they recognized that the victims were in turn aggressors. So it was literally like there was, like I say about this book, it's a tale of borders and beliefs shaped by the games people play.
Yeah.
So the games are still being played. The people may have changed. So even that time, there was a stoking of hatred by
Mm.
both sides. Now, whether it was the British who had their own geopolitical interests, whether it was the political ambitions of Mountbatten or Jinnah or Nehru or even Gandhi,
Mhm.
that doesn't matter. The fact is that nobody wins except people whose political motives it is to have this happen.
Yes.
We don't win. So if the young, the idea behind writing is if young people can recognize that for what it is, then there's some point to having written a book. Otherwise, we're just all writing, and what's the point, really?
I can see so many people, commenting, saying Toba Tek Singh. Obviously, it strikes a chord. Joanne Saldana, who's a librarian and wonderful reviewer of books from Madras, saying Toba Tek Singh. Aditi Rao, also a writer based here in Bangalore, saying one of my Manto's finest stories. Ramendra Kumar, a writer based out of Bangalore, and a very dear friend of Funky Rainbow, saying Coal, though by Manto, is one of the most brutally impacting stories he's ever written. And, appreciating the phrase that you put out, saying quiet heroes, such a beautiful phrase. Vijay Lakshmi Nagraj saying, what a touching, recounting of this, story of your grandparents, Nayanika. And Muttama saying, many stories that have been buried, all untold from Bangladesh as well. But, the lovely thing about across the line, and I do want you to tell our writers a little bit about it, about how you have this young boy, and who wants to set up a cafe, who wants to find some, or stumbles upon some recipes in the kitchen, and then is really interested in setting up a cafe. And the girl who's a cricket crazy girl, who sneaks off to play cricket, whether even if her parents tell her not to do that, and how their lives collide, and how you have sort of conflated this with 1947, when the line of partition was drawn by Cyril Radcliffe. Just tell our viewers a little bit about that, how you juxtapose the histories in this book of fiction.
So, because I have teenage daughters myself, I, I always think that why would a teenager want to pick up a book about the partition? I mean, why do they care? So I wanted it to be a story that was contemporary. So it's rooted in the partition, but it's a contemporary story where, like you said, Inaya is a girl, a Pakistani teenager who wants to play cricket for Pakistan one day. Jay is this boy growing up in New Delhi who wants to have a cafe where he does his grandmother's recipes with a twist, fusion kind of thing. And their lives, their worlds collide in London, because I couldn't figure out how their lives would collide in
Right.
India or Pakistan. So their lives collide in London, and then an old story unfolds, a story that started in 1947 with the drawing of a line. And because it is sort of cricket and food. I thought these were two things that would cross borders.
Absolutely.
And, it would sort of draw in teenagers and young people to at least see, okay, what's this book about? And, once they get into the book, they can hopefully recognize and see the parallels between then and now. And there are chilling parallels. But you don't want to present it to young people as a book which is about history, because that's boring, right? Why would they care? So it's a contemporary story. It just is rooted in the partition, and there are intercutting storylines,
It
which
is.
I thought would be a nice way to do it. And also, the partition is seen through the eyes of two youngsters uh, in 1947, and then through the eyes of two youngsters in the 2000s. And again, those parallels. And I was mindful that I wanted to do it through an uncolored perspective. I didn't want to take. I was very mindful of that because my daughters over here have friends. Some of their closest friends are Pakistani. Some of my closest friends over here are Pakistani, and I wanted to tell the. And growing up, a lot of my friends were, how it was. We all had friends from everywhere, and I didn't want to even uh, unknowingly take sides. So that was very, very key to me, that I tell the story through the eyes of children who
Mhm.
typically will not have bias.
Bias.
Yeah.
Lovely. It's a book that for those of you who haven't read it, I mean, children, young adults, adults, it's a fabulous book to read, about, like Nanika says, crossing those, borders and building bridges, really. But from this book emerged this special FB group that you actually named after the online movement that Jay and Inaya launch in the book, called Piecing It Together, PEACE-ING it together, where you, along with, an actress from Pakistan, Nadia Jamil, invite people to share stories of crossing borders and building bridges. Can you, tell us a little bit about that Facebook group and share maybe one memorable story that you discovered through this initiative?
Okay. So when I was writing across the line, so piecing it together was this slightly cheesy, sort of thing that Jay starts, because that's the character he is. And Inaya makes fun of him, saying, "Oh God, I mean, how crazy are you, Jay? Who's going to do this? This is like, death by Facebook kind of initiative that you're starting." And he does it all the same. And then I was invited to an online lift fest in Lahore. And now this is the closest I have ever come to going back to Pakistan. And I wish I had taken my grandparents back to see their village or their home, or, I never managed to do that. But I wanted to at least see it. So, I mean, the closest I ever came to going back was to go to this online lit fest. And in this online lit fest, the lady who invited me, Bela Jamil, she invited a Pakistani actor called Nadia Jamil, who's really lovely, to read from across the line, because she does these beautiful readings.
No.
And while she was reading, and she read the book before that, and she had tears in her eyes, and she rang me and she said, why don't we do what Jan and I have done in real life? You're from India, I'm from Pakistan. Why don't we give this a go? And both of us are eternal hopefuls. And we were like, who's going to really join this group? But she said, let's just give it a go. And so I did. So I just, wrote, okay, this is this group that we're starting. And literally, like in the book, overnight, we had so many stories pouring in.
Yeah.
And now it's like taken a life of its own. There are people writing. I think a lot of people didn't find closure. A lot of people of that generation, especially,
Mm, mm.
didn't find any outlet for those stories. And it's so lovely that they are actually writing over there.
I know it's a Facebook group that all of you can look at. Do you want to share one wonderful story that you discovered or stumbled upon through this group that you set up?
So this is literally an absolutely. I get goosebumps when I actually think of this, because I had never my grandparents had never told me a lot of stuff, about their previous lives. I mean, we were very close, my cousins and all of us, we'd hear a lot of stories, but they didn't tell us what they had left behind. And so there was this temple that apparently my great 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 grandfather had built in 1850, and this was a temple that a lot of pilgrims who were going to Kailash would stop at for the night,
Oh.
on their pilgrimage. I had never seen photographs of this temple or anything. And then a Pakistani journalist wrote an article in the Dawn about this temple and how it's one of the, uh, places in Rawalpindi that a lot of tourists should visit. So this temple is apparently now a school for visually impaired children. And that's such a beautiful way for a temple to be used. Now, I had never seen this temple, and the lady who invited me to the Lit Fest, she actually took the trouble to go to this temple from where she lives in Lahore. She traveled to Rawalpindi. She took photographs of the temple for me, and she took photographs of the children at the blind school, and she sent them to me. And for me, this was like, I cannot even explain. It was like I was seeing this for the first time, and it was honestly just, I mean, I can't think of a better use for this place. It was a place of worship. Okay, they don't use it as a temple, but what better use than to put it to the use of children, for their education. So, and this is the lady. She's just like a godsend. Bela Jamil is her name. And, so I'm just saying this is one story, but there are so many stories like this.
Absolutely. I mean, invite all the, all our viewers to go check out that Facebook page, piecing it together to read, stories of such resilience and hope that people, put out there. And it's a group that you can freely join and, read these heartwarming stories. Of course, from here we move on to, about you being the screenwriter for Shakuntala Devi, starring Vidya Balan. How different was it from writing a children's book? And what was that experience of seeing your words come alive on screen like?
So again, this is so Shakuntala Devi had come to my school, my little school in Calcutta, when I was about 6 or 7 years old. So see how all these seeds get planted, Vidya, when one is little. Almost everything is sort of connected. And she was like this magician, pulling numbers out of a hat, and I don't even know what she was doing, but I just remember that show as if she was this, just giving
Fascinating.
absolutely, sort of crazy answers, which were always correct. And it was a show, this lady was a show person. So when I was when I finally became, an author and things like that, I thought I wanted to write a story where the hero is a woman whose superpower is mathematics. And I thought, how cool is that idea? And so I started writing, and then early on in the process, a friend of mine who's a director, also in London, she said, why don't we do this as a film? And I said, but I've never written for screen. So she
Screen.
said, no, no, no. I know when I talk to you that you're a visual. Like even when you write, you're very visual in the way that you tell things. So I think you'd be able to do it really easily. So then I actually just did, I started reading a lot of scripts, how they write. So it's of course a very visual medium. So you can't, you don't have the luxury of going into the, explaining the inner world. Everything has to be apparent, action dialogue to the, and this is the document that the producer, the director, the costume designer, the production designer, the cinematographer, everybody is going to be informed by. So you have to keep that in mind. And again, it's very structured. It has to be 100 pages. You can't have, you have to go by the script. And the length has to be 100 pages because it has to be 120 minutes. So between 90 to 120 pages, you have to have an interval. So what happened with this is, we wrote it. I wrote it thinking there will be an interval. So accordingly, you have a point which keeps audiences engaged and then brings them back. But then the pandemic happened, and finally we didn't have a cinematic release, which was so heartbreaking. But then we had a release on Amazon, But the thing was, we had already written it for a cinematic release, which, in hindsight, if we had known it was meant for a digital release, I mean, left to me, I would have written a much sort of quieter film. Here it was meant for, in our heads, we were like, we'd take it to schools. And because it's like making maths so fun and exciting for children, I imagined all these morning shows at schools. And so it had to be a little louder because it was going to be consumed in a dark hall with 200 people. But now suddenly it was going to be consumed in a living room. And you're competing with, content from around the world. So you have to, it had to be written slightly differently. But one didn't have an option because shooting had finished and the pandemic happened.
Right.
So then it was the editing room that came into play to sort of help us prepare it. But it was, in books, one has more of a say. It's you and your editor, and if you both are happy, it goes ahead. Here, there are so many stakeholders, so that's a difference. But you asked me how I felt. I mean, Vidya is absolutely, she is fabulous at, she takes the script so seriously. She would read every single bit of research. I would send her like every week, maybe 3 interviews of Shakuntala Devi, because this was a real person. It wasn't just something I could make up. Of course, you made up a lot of stuff, but you had to go by her life
in context. Yeah.
And because it's a mother-daughter story, we had to get that aspect into it. And she read each piece of research. I remember once there was a article from the Time magazine in 1950 where Shakuntala Devi was on, and I had got a clip of that. And when I sent it to her, apparently you needed a subscription to the Time magazine to read it, and she couldn't read it. And this was like in a big bunch of lots of links and articles, and I would send her bits and pieces. And she writes and says, I can't read this one, which goes to show she was reading each and every little bit. And, I had been told that, actors don't read half the stuff, they just listen to narrations. She was just amazing. And when she would internalize it and then walk on and camera on, and literally, because I had seen Shakuntala Devi in the flesh, she would just, it was magical.
I can imagine. My gosh, that whole process sounds so fascinating, really. That whole 120 pages, or it's got to be 100 pages, not more than that, to be able to fit a story into that requirement. Quite amazing, really. Of course, just to come back, and I know, our audience is probably getting ready for lunch, so what do you think parents, and most of people watching, parents, teachers, and librarians, what do you think they can do to nurture tolerance in children and help them embrace diversity? Are there, one or two books that you may want to recommend, that you think parents should get their children to read?
So, yes, I think children, basically, no matter what we tell them, they do what they see us doing. So if we nurture tolerance, I think it all starts at home in little things, even like just how we resolve conflict on a day-to-day basis. Do we walk away? Do we engage in dialogue? Do we listen? Even in the case of our child in conflict with us, do we say it's my way or the highway? Do we listen?
Yeah.
Because that's what will inform them about how conflict should be resolved, I think. And in terms of books, I absolutely love maybe Papsi Sidhwa's Ice Candy Man.
Okay.
I absolutely love that. And in fact, I was listening to an interview by her, and unconsciously I've done what she did, because in her book also she has a little Parsi girl who's an outsider to the whole partition, looking in and talking about the story. So an uncolored perspective again. I love When Hitler Stole Pink Rabbit. Paro Anand's No Guns at My Son's Funeral.
Yeah, in fact, there was a child in the audience saying, "How come you're not recommending No Guns at My son's funeral?" And
Oh, it's such a beautiful book. Khalid Hosseini, again, just the human cost of war. A Thousand Splendid Suns, or it's just, I had gone to a talk by Khalid Hosseini where he spoke about, we all see so much tragedy around us, right? But it becomes a statistic in a newspaper. But what
Right.
literature or books do is they make it a story about someone, and that's when we can connect.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise it's like we're just desensitized, because yeah, they're dying in Gaza, okay, they're dying in wherever. It's like it's a statistic, and our mind just blocks it out because it's too immense to comprehend. But when
Mhm.
it becomes a story about a person, then it's that emotional connect, and then you can actually respond in a way that is human.
Mhm. Absolutely. So, so well said, really, right? That, I mean, even now, when we're right in the midst of this pandemic, so many people, we're losing so many people to the pandemic. But, and is that just a statistic? Because that person is somebody's mother or somebody's father, somebody's aunt, somebody's uncle, a dear, friend, perhaps. It's this, the power of books, the power of, the literature to be the greatest peacemaker in the world. I mean, some of the books that you recommend, such lovely reads. We do have No Guns at My Son's Funeral because we specialize in a collection of children's and young adult books. But certainly the ones that you've recommended, Bapsi Sudava, and uh,
And Catch 22, and maybe a Private Peaceful, and Animal Farm, and I
I
mean,
know,
there's
I
such
know you
lovely books.
shared this wonderful photograph of you with Michael Morprugo, really, right? And
Yeah, he read Ambushed. He was so nice. He actually read Ambushed. So we were like, those are my daughters. So he was like, I have to visit India, see the tigers.
I know, such lovely books. We've had Morpugo in our collection. I can see so many friends saying, Ramendra Kumar saying Kashmir, Kashmir by Deepa Agarwal, which we recommended just before you came up on the show. And Divya Purandhar saying Nainika Mehtani has a way of holding her young, digitally savvy audience hooked to her books. My son Abhay read Ambushed after it came highly recommended by FR in one go. He didn't leave his seat until he finished it, and he also loved Genghis Khan
Oh,
very much. He still remembers her visit to his school arranged by Funky Rainbow. Thank
oh,
you.
so lovely. But yeah, I think my battery is just running low.
Okay. Oh, all right. All right. Okay. I'm afraid, yep, we've lost, Nanika, but, such a compelling writer. And we do urge you to consider her books, fabulous, especially across the line, telling a powerful story of love. Set against the backdrop of the partition. Thank you so much to Nainika Mehtani for joining us. I think, her battery ran out of charge. I know that we're all, way past our show. So we're quickly just going to say hello to a couple of other people who've joined us in the course of the show. And there's Alikla Lal, Sachuvas, Kutuki Kids Official, Sonalika Jain, Devika Rangachari, Dinesh Nambiar, Aditi Rao, Meeta Kothari, Payal Dhar, Shruti Sunagar, Kavita Mandanna, Harry Licious, Chulbuli Ladki, Trauma, Matthew Anita, Surbhi Mittal, Asha Nehmaya, Mommy of Missy Mr., Vachana Shetty, Prisha Bora, Drishti Agarwal, Shohini Mitra, Ramendra Kumar, Nandini Nair, and Divya Purandar. Thank you so much for joining us at the let's give peace a chance bazaar. Shohini Mitra saying what a fantastic insightful conversation and so real. The concerns that come out of Nainika's books, right? I mean, are so real, something that every one of us can easily identify with, whether we're 12, 25, or 55, or even older. And, such a powerful celebration of the fact that children hold the hope for a better world, for a peaceful world. Joanne Saldana saying, thank you. That was such a wonderful session. Thank you to Nenika Mehtani and Team Funky Rainbow. Vijay Lakshmi Nagaraj saying, thank you, Team FR, for this lovely bazaar birthday treat. Meeting and listening to Nenika and her fabulous journey of writing was so interesting. Congratulations and a big thank you. Paro's No Guns for My Son's Funeral was written when we were both in Kashmir together. Nanika seems to have come back, and Sham's just going to bring her on for a bit before we say bye bye. Sunila, there you are. Your battery
I'm
ran
so
out.
sorry. I'm so sorry.
Not
I
at
have a very
all.
old
Not at all.
machine, and it just dies on me very unceremoniously without warning.
I was just reading out a whole bunch of comments, people appreciating, what you've said, talking about your, lovely conversation with us. Sunila saying, thank you for this wonderful session, Vidya and Nanika. Team FR gets it right every single time. Preeti Ramchandran saying, thank you and look forward to celebrating so many more Bazaar birthdays with Team Funky Rainbow. Divya Purandar, whose son Abhay is the one who remembers your session, as does Tamanna, saying that they enjoyed your books so much and
Thank
enjoyed this
you so
delightful
much.
session as well.
Special thank you to Abhay also.
Thank you so much for joining us all the way from London. We really appreciate, Nanika, to be up and talk about your books bright and early. Really, a big salam going out to you,
Oh,
Muttama,
thank
saying Namma Bangalore Hudgi you are. So
Thank you so much, Muttama, Sham, Vidya. Really, really, always lovely to be with you. Thank you for having me. So lovely being with all of you. Thank you for all the lovely comments. I'm sorry for my glitch on my part.
not to worry, don't know of any live session that goes without hitches and glitches. The maza of it is, to have all these hitches and glitches as well. But thank you so much for joining us, Nanika. We'll say bye bye to our audience. I'm
Thank
sure they're
you.
ready to, grab
Have
their
lunch.
lunches.
Yeah.
For those of you who'd like to pick up the books, they are available at a 15% discount, between today and Monday, 12 noon. Do go to our website, www.funkyrainbow.com. Click on the tab that says Book Bazaar. The first drop down is War and Peace. There are a whole host of books up there, and including, ones that we haven't been able to recommend, because when we look at our books again and again, we discover new themes and new meanings every single time that we look at it. So if you've enjoyed some of the books that we've spoken about, and if you'd like to pick up the books, do consider picking them up from Funky Rainbow. Book Pickle saying, brilliant bazaar, you guys are matchless. It's you, it's all of you, all the writers, all the illustrators, all the parents, teachers, and librarians watching that make us revisit our books with newer eyes. You give us the hope to carry on even in these difficult times. Thank you so much. And here's wishing all of you a peaceful weekend filled with books and reading.
Thank
I'll
you.
see you
Stay
next week.
safe. Stay well.
Thank you. Thank you, and bye bye.